All right, guys, it's Shop Bench Part 2. So the bench, I've been thinking about where I want the middle shelf of the bench to be, and I plan on storing totes inside there with all of my junk inside there, and I've decided on two totes, heavy-duty totes I'm going to buy. The first is a 15-gallon tote. That's 11 7/8 high, 17 1/4 wide, and 25 3/4 long. There's a heavier or bigger 27-gallon tote that's 15 1/4 high, 20 5/8 wide, and 30 1/2 long. I'm going to store the 27-gallon tote on the floor, as it'll be the heavier of the totes. So as you recall from the previous videos, obviously this is not to scale and my drawing skills are absolutely atrocious. I've got a bench that's 18 feet, or going to be 18 feet long, and the bench height off the floor is 42 inches. So what I'm going to do is the middle shelf is going to be out of 2x4 plywood. It doesn't need to be as heavy duty as the top of the bench, with a 3/4 inch piece of plywood top on it. So the bench thickness at the top, with 5 1/2 inches and 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood, is 6 1/4 on the top. The standard 2x4 3 1/2 plus 3/4 inch ply means that'll be at 4 1/4 inches. With 42 inches high, the bottom of the 2x6 from the floor is going to be 35 3/4 inches. So the plan is this bottom 2x4 I'm going to make 17 inches off the ground. That way there's enough room to get my hands in there, be able to pull these totes out. So it'll be 17 inches from the ground. What that does then, so 17, and it's 21 1/4 here. So 21, so 35 3/4 minus 21 1/4. That's going to be 14 1/2. So 14 1/2 inches here. So 17 inches will accommodate the height of the 27-gallon tote. 14 1/2 inches will accommodate the height of the 15-gallon totes. As far as the legs, like I said, I'm going to do 4x4 legs in the bench. The biggest tote here is 20 5/8 wide. So what I'm going to do is the 4x4 will be 48 inches inside diameter, so it'll accommodate a couple of totes side by side here. And then just for some added strength, what I'll do with these 4x4s is I do have a stacked dado set for my table saw, and what I can do is I'll notch out the tops of these 4x4s such that the, well, here we go, we'll just do it like this, so that my 2x6 is sitting inside. I'll notch that out. That should make it quite a bit stronger rather than just hanging off the side of the 4x4. So we'll move on to the next part here. We'll start cutting some wood. All right, so the bench, as I said previously, I want to put my miter saw in the middle of the bench. I've decided that's going to be a bad idea, and the reason is I've got, you know, my soldering irons, things like that I want to put on the bench, and I don't need to have stuff, you know, hitting the stuff that I store on the bench. So If I want a miter saw table at some other time, I can build one. But I think for this bench, we're not gonna put the miter saw in there. Additionally, I decided to go with a 30-inch deep bench. What I did is I wanted to maximize the depth without making it uncomfortable to reach the plugs. So I was sitting in my kitchen, and there, those are just over 24 inches deep on the counters. I was like, yeah, I could go a little bit deeper than that. And out measuring my garbage can, how deep that thing is, and that's a little too deep. So I think 30 inches is going to be just right for a bench depth. All right, we're going to start getting this saw set up here. And the first thing I'm going to do, I've got the saw. It's set up at 0 degrees. Lock down the saw. That's going to get the cuts nice and square to the back fence. Also, we want to make sure we get anything out of the edge. I got a staple here. We want to make sure that the blade lasts as long as we can. Blades aren't cheap. So we'll make the first cut, and then each subsequent cut with a 2x6 on the back and a 2x6 on the front, that's 3 inches. The cross members of the bench are going to be 27 inches. So let's start cutting. All right, the first cut that we're going to make be here at 27 inches. Remember what I said with the kerf of the blade. We want to make sure that we're cutting on the left side of the piece of wood so that this piece is exactly 27 inches, not 27 inches minus the 0.095 inches of kerf that's on this blade. All right, so our cut is exactly 27 inches. So I'm gonna get cutting here, and then I will come back when I've got all of these pieces cut. All right, guys, I was sitting and reviewing the video for the 27-inch cut, and I realized that I made a mistake in the length or the measurement of the length of the cut that I need to make on these cross braces here. So I said that the bench had to be 30 inches wide, and I forgot to take into account the 1.5 inches for the header that's on the back wall. So with an 1.5 inch header on the back wall, the two 2x6s on either end here means I've got 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches, so it's 4.5 inches off of 30 inches means that this cross member here is not 27 inches, but is actually 25.5 inches. So all the subsequent cuts will be 25.5 inches, but that would have been a real pain to find that at the very end. All right, good morning, guys. It's the next day. I stayed up late last night and I got the bench top screwed together, so it's sitting on the other side of the shop. So the project today, we're going to start cutting the 4x4 legs that are going to go on the bench. So as I said in an earlier video, I'm going to notch out the 4x4 such that the 2x6s and 2x4s can rest inside the legs and make them as strong as possible. The important measurements here is the bottom shelf. That notch needs to be at least 17 inches off the ground to accommodate putting the tote that I want, the storage underneath the bench. The bench top, that needs to be at 35 3/4 inches off the ground. That way I can have a 2x6 piece of wood in here with a 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood top, and that's going to make the bench sit at 42 inches where I want it. The overall length at which we cut the 4x4, that is not really an important measurement. And the reason that is I only need the top of this, of the 4x4 to sit under flush of the 2x6 that's in here, so that it's not, so that the Baltic birch top can sit flush on the top. So to make these cuts, I do happen to have a stacked dado set, and which I'll be using to make these cuts. So I'll show you how to use these and how to load them into your table saw so that you can make these cuts. Alright guys, so a stacked dado set is a great tool to have if you need to remove a lot of material at once. When you're using a stacked dado set, the most important thing is take the time to read the instructions. As the name would imply, stacked means you're going to be stacking a number of blades together to make very wide joints, so you're going to be removing a lot of material at a time. So you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly as not to hurt yourself. Also, the directions are going to have on here how to stack the blades to get various cutting widths. So make sure that you don't throw this out, you keep that. So as I said, the way a stacked dado set works is you have two exterior blades in addition to what they call ripping blades that sit in between those, and the kerf on these, or they have various width kerfs that are clearly marked, such that when you stack these together you get those cutting widths. The most important thing when using a stacked dado set is the teeth of the blades. Focus. There we go. The teeth of the blades, you cannot have the teeth of those blades pressing together, because these are carbide tip blades. They're very brittle. They will break when you clamp down the nut on the arbor. So as you stack the blades together, you're going to want to make sure that the blades are offset such that when you tighten them down, you don't break the carbide tip teeth. Now, if you don't have a stacked dado set, oh, I should also add it while I got them here. So your kit, if you have it, is going to come with various thicknesses of shims. And once you've stacked your set to whatever cutting width that you want, you can measure that with your tape measure, with your ruler, with a calipers if you have it, to see how close you are to that. And depending on where you're at, if you're under flush or over flush, you can add or remove blades or add shims as necessary to change the width of your dado set. So very important to keep these, not only just separate them in the box so that their teeth aren't touching, but to make your cuts right. So if you don't have a stacked dado set, you can also do this cut with regular saw blades. However, you want to make sure that when you're using a regular saw blade, that you want a very coarse ripping blade to cut with, because for just what I told you, you don't want the carbide teeth next to each other, that you chip these and then wreck your blade. So they want to offset them. So the more coarse of a blade that you use, the better it's gonna be. You know, this is a 24 tooth blade. You could even go more coarse than this, but you're not going to be using the 40s or the 80 tooth fine cut blades for doing a stacked set. In addition to stacked dado set, there's also wobble dados that are out there. So there's various ways to accomplish this. So I'll show you how to install this on the table saw. Alright, so I removed the guard from my table saw. When you're changing blades on your table saw, most important thing, make sure the power is turned off or unplugged. but also make sure that you've brought the blade up as high as it goes to give you the easiest access to the arbor. The other thing is that this arbor is a left-handed thread. So the normal adage of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey doesn't work. This is righty-loosey, lefty-tighty with the arbor nut. So as you can see, opposite direction. Don't drop it down there or you're gonna have to fish it out. All right, with the blade removed, I'm gonna start stacking my dado in the saw. The width of the cut that I'm gonna make is not terribly important because they don't make dados that go 3.5 inches wide or 5.5 inches wide. So I'm just gonna stack some together to remove the most amount of material. Make sure that you're following the directions on the side of the saw blade because it's easier to see in the directions, but these blades, the teeth are cut such that the side of the blade, or which side you put the blade on, matters, so you get a nice square cut. So and obviously the rotation is correct. So for my saw, the blade is turning into me here, so this blade will go all the way on the right. And also make sure that it fits the arbor that you have. I'll put a shim in there just to keep the teeth apart, and then I'll put a couple of 1/8 inch ripper blades in there. So these, you're gonna wanna make sure that you put those 90 degrees apart, and as you see here, that the teeth don't come together. So put a couple of those guys in there. And then on your ripper blades, it's not necessary to put a shim in there because your other ripper blade is the shim that you're using. And then as you can see, the other exterior blade will be marked this side out so that it goes on the right side here. And then what we'll do is tighten the nut down again. Remember, this one is lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. And just do it hand tight. And the reason is you can inspect the blade and make sure that you don't have any carbide teeth that are crushed together, because that will be very bad for you. So just get that finger tight, and we can start rotating. So if you see here, this tooth here is pushing down on that blade there, so I'm going to add another shim. Alright, so let's just slowly move that around. Make sure that we don't have any blades that are impinging. Take that off. Alright, so that guy we'll put right there, and I think that we're good to start making this cut. So I will tighten this blade down and we'll start making a cut. All right, some of you might have just caught what I did here. I had forgotten to put the little shoulder back on here, and I was just doing a sanity check before I button everything up, and went, oh, missing a piece. So just very important to just take a second before you start your work to make sure that everything's ready to go. All right, guys, I got the first leg measured up here. So this is going to be the bottom of the leg here, and at 17 inches will be the first shelf. I made this width here a little bit proud of 3.5 inches. That way the 2x4 will fit in there nicely, not too snug and have to hammer it in there. And then at 35 3/4 will be the 5.5 inch top. I did make the overall length 41 inches, so that should give me 1/4 inch of space to the plywood top, so that will sit flush on the top. So I'll start making my cuts here. What I did forget to mention with the dado sets, to say that they make a lot of dust is an extreme understatement. You are removing a lot of material at a time, and they make a crazy amount of dust. So I don't have a vacuum set up on mine. If you don't either, make sure you've got it pointing in a direction that you can easily sweep up the mess afterwards. So I'll make you these cuts and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, guys, leg number 1 is cut here. I do have a piece of 2x4 scrap piece, so that fits in there very nicely, nice and flush. And then I've got a piece of scrap 2x6. And you can see that fits in there nicely. So that should make the bench extremely strong. Just to show you how much dust these things make, that's one piece of wood. And there is dust everywhere. So if you don't have a vacuum, like I said, point it out where it's easy to sweep up. Otherwise, get a vacuum on it. All right, we got all the legs are cut. I ended up hooking up a shop vac to the table saw to try and control some of the mess, but you don't get everything, but you get a lot of it. So all the legs are cut, everything fits nicely inside, so we will start screwing it to the bench, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. All right, I got the middle shelf. It's built, and the legs are fastened on, and they fit really nicely. It's pretty rigid already. So I did not get myself some plywood to build the top for this, so that's going to be tomorrow's job. So next time you see this bench, there should be a top on here, and it should be hanging on the wall. All right, guys, all the bits and pieces we've been building, I hung up on the wall. So all 18 feet are hanging on the side of the wall. Everything fit together really nicely. I notched out the plywood so it fit nicely on the 4x4 legs. Like I said before, I recessed all the 4x4, so the plywood top that goes on here will sit nice and flush. Everything fit together squarely, so I'm really happy with it. So back to work tomorrow. Start the birch top plywood a little bit later. I will do some updates for it to show what it looks like complete, but I think this is going to conclude this video. So if you like what you guys saw, please subscribe, please like the video, let me know what I can do differently. I'm happy to oblige because, like I said, these videos are for you. So please enjoy, and we'll see you on the next video.